As the search continues amid the mountain of twisted metal and crumbled concrete that was once a dignified beachfront residence, there is also a search for answers. How did this happen? What tragic conditions might have brought this 40-year-old building crumbling to the ground? And could it have been prevented? Each day, the list of clues grows a little longer, but it will be many months before the investigations might yield any definitive answers.
It just doesn't happen. You don't see buildings falling down in America.
I mean, it is really, really traumatic to see the collapse of a massive structure like that.
The building, all these huge buildings, gone.
What we're talking about here is an unprecedented tragedy, an unprecedented crisis, and one that isn't comparable really anywhere in the U.S.
The problem is the building has literally pancaked. It has gone down, and I mean, there's just feet in between stories where there were 10 feet.
There were 13-story buildings with most of the building gone.
I have no idea why this would collapse in this manner. I have no idea. It's very, very rare. It's very unique.
Have I ever seen a building collapse like this building collapsed? No. In almost 40 years in the fire service, I have never seen a building collapse like this building collapsed.
We have a 12-story, 136 unit apartment complex that had sustained a partial collapse.
This is the type of the collapse that you don't see that on an everyday basis. There was a report that heavy construction material was stored in the roof. There was a report that people were hearing noises, cracking, things like that. So all these factors needs to be, structural engineers are going to be collecting all these pieces of information together with everything that is related to the history of this building.
It could have been a number of things that alone wouldn't have caused the problem, but together with the trigger caused the problem. You look at things like when they were doing work on a roof, could that possibly have caused anything? You begin to look at what is the strength of the concrete versus what it was supposed to be. You look at the design of the building, and then you look at hurricanes. It could have been 10 years ago, but that could have overstressed material, and it was not as strong as it originally was.
What we've been told by the Homeland Security folks who have been out, this does not look in any way, shape, or form to be a terrorist act, which leads one thing. This is probably a structural issue, and from the engineers that I've been speaking to, they believe it's probably a subsurface issue.
What's underneath the building? Is it stable ground? That's the structural bed of the overall building itself. The building is resting on the ground. What changes were occurring? The building's settlement, along with the spalling of the rebar, could have combined to add stress to those load-bearing items that allowed this building to fail.
The big problem is with our salt air and water, if the building has not been protected, the concrete that is, we know that salt water will eventually get into and attack the steel and corrode the steel. And then the steel expands in size and then cracks the concrete. We're known to have one of the most aggressive environments here for buildings because of our salt air next to the ocean.
We would have a lot of salt water come in through the bottom of the foundation. It was so much water all the time that the pumps never could keep up with it. The cars would float. That's how much water was in there that would be floating around in the parking lot.
And being in Florida and knowing this area, flooding is really also not a thing you go, oh, maybe somebody wants to look at this. It was always wet, even when it was dry out.
Our protocol as engineers is if we see an issue that comes up that represents any kind of a danger or any kind of a potential in a danger to the occupants, then what we do is we are, by our registration, we're required, of course, to alert the occupants, alert the management company.
The structural integrity of the Champlain condos has actually been studied before. Tonight, we have been looking at a report from 2018.
It found issues and documented them.
The report contains several areas that indicate structural defect in this building. We see at the columns that the steel was spalling out. We also see that the membrane surfaces on the balconies were failing. The building envelope that seals the building from the outside environmental damages, such as salt air, were compromised. The doors, the windows, and the roof. My understanding is that there were plans that were prepared to repair this building in 2021. That was too long overdue. Cost plays an effect in all decisions on building repair and maintenance. When you delay maintenance, the cost of repairing goes up exponentially.
Nowhere in that report there is anything that I would, mark as this is a aha moment, and if we would have known this, we could have prevented this. Nothing there really speaks that there is a catastrophe of this size that could be happening.
These buildings they're designed well, they'll perform well, they're built well, but they had to be maintained.
This was a tight-knit community. They want to know what happened to all the people who are unaccounted for. But in the coming weeks, they'll be working with an engineer to figure out what brought this building down.
With respect to the information, we directed our staff to go ahead and scan every shred of documentation that the town of Surfside has, which includes going to our archive storage sites.
We do obviously need to identify why this happened. This is going to be something that's important. It is something that's going to be very thorough, and it is something that is not going to happen in a day or two. This is going to take a long time.
This is a puzzle, and we have to figure out how to put all the pieces together.